Hi, everyone. This is Unleashed with me, Scarlett Johnson. Oh, I have my glasses on. I need to get anti-flare, like the glare, but I really need them to read sometimes. Presented by Moms for Living. It's been a day already. And I have special guest Erin Lee, my friend and Mama Bear activist from Colorado. And I want to hear what's going on there. I just talked with Sarah Garriott yesterday, who led the effort in Washington State to put initiatives on the ballot because the governor and the state representatives both these, I don't know, do you have like we call ours Assembly and Senate. Do you have
House and Senate?
And but they're not on board. They want boys and girls bathrooms and boys and girls sports, and they want to have secret little what do you call it? Skittles like groups, secret little rainbow club groups with your very young minor children, where they talk to them about inappropriate concepts and basically propagandize to them about how much fun it would be if they were to identify as transgender. And they don't want you to know about it, and they don't want you to have access to your child's medical records. Yes, even in elementary school. So you are in Colorado. And your organization, you are trying to do the same thing in Colorado that just happened in Washington State. So, Erin, welcome. Tell us about your organization and what you're doing, and then a brief rewind. You've been on before, but let's talk a little bit about why you're so passionate about this issue.
So I'm in Colorado, where it's the same insanity as Washington. Like, I keep joking, although it's not really funny, that we're the next Minnesota. It's a matter of time. Washington, California, Minnesota, Massachusetts, it's all the same playbook, where we have, like you said, we have no representation in the House, the Senate, the executive offices. We haven't for over a decade. It's like we, the people, have no means to fight back against the insane legislation that keeps coming out. Like last year in Colorado, just to give you an example, they defined not affirming your child as coercive control and gave courts a license to take your kids away. Luckily, we struck that language, but it's back this year. And they also made it criminal to record the accurate sex on a death certificate. So if someone dies and you don't report their gender identity as their sex, then that is a criminal offense punishable with 4 months in jail. So that's
When
Colorado.
did they do that? I'm writing this down. See, I have to I need my notepad. When did they do that? I did not hear about that.
That was last year. It was House Bill 25-1109.
Oh my gosh, you're brilliant. Okay, hold on.
Well, I keep track. Someone has to, because they passed it so fast.
You do. Okay, I'm writing this down because I'm going to post about this, because if I do social media, and if I don't know about it, there's a lot of people that don't know about it. So what was that bill? House Bill?
It's 25-1109. And I'll send you some clips of like Colin Wright and Jamie Reed. And we had some great people show up and testify, and they were laughing. Like, they were laughing throughout their testimony because it was so insane that this was even something that was being presented. And it got really crazy in that hearing. One of the bill sponsors, who's like the queen of abortion in Colorado, which, by the way, we have constitutionally protected abortion up into and after birth, taxpayer paid. So we are the worst abortion state. You can let a baby die on the table and the taxpayers pay for abortions here. And it's in the Constitution, so we can't really fight it. But that bill sponsor, who's like the abortion queen, also sponsored this bill and claimed that gender identities formed in the second trimester. So here she is aborting babies in the third trimester and after their birth, advocating for that. Then she also claims that you're trans at 16 weeks gestation, which is insane. But that's Colorado. That's what we're dealing with.
Did she say that? Did she actually say that out loud?
Yep. On the record during the hearing at the mic while she was defending her bill.
Okay, you need to send me that.
I will.
I'm sure it was out. I did, like, someone just went
on. Well, you can't even keep up. Like, they've had so much.
You cannot keep up. It's like, did you hear this? Did you hear this? It's insane.
It's almost laughable. Like, Libs of TikTok, we keep Haya going. Like, there's at least 2 posts about Colorado every single day. And I like to joke that we're like the annoying little brother of California, where people don't pay attention to us, so we act out even harder. So oftentimes we'll pass bills and California will mimic. And people just go, well, California's the worst. Colorado's like, hold my beer, like watch what we can do. And no one pays attention to us. So they just keep doing it harder and harder and seeing what they can get away with, almost like a litmus test for what they'll roll out to other states. And, 2 decades ago, we were a red state. We were a rancher conservative state that got taken over by leftists. 4 billionaires bought the state. And if it can happen to us, it can happen to any state. Like you are not immune in Wisconsin and Arizona, and Texas and Florida. You got to hold the line. You got to pay attention to what's happening in states like Colorado and Washington, because they will come to you. And if we don't help us hold the line here, then it's just going to take over the entire country, these ideological laws that are just stripping our parental rights and harming our kids. So
they passed legislation that it is a 4-month jail sentence for putting the wrong sex on a death certificate. Right. So born a female and then claiming to be a male, like you have to. They dug up those bones though. 100 years from now, guess what they'd find? They would.
We rallied for a gender identity box. So we're like, you know what? We'll play your stupid game. Just make it a separate box for your nonsense, because this is statistical medical data. Like Colorado is going to be the first state that has an uptick in women dying from prostate cancer. We cannot mess with medical data, and they wouldn't do it because they demand absolute fealty to their ideology. Gender ideology is the state mandated religion of Colorado. And if we all don't abide by it, it's criminal. It's now criminal. This is a law that I'm suing the state over, my organization. It was House Bill 1312, which the whole country did pay attention to that, but it made misgendering and dead naming illegal. So if you won't call that man a woman, then just like Jack the cake baker, the state can come after you with penalties, fines, ask you to re-educate yourself, take courses. I mean, they've bankrupted Jack over this same issue, and now it applies to every single Coloradan. So I cannot call a man without facing potential lawsuit and penalties.
So that passed?
That passed. They all pass. We have no checks and balances.
What legislation is that?
That's House Bill 1312, 25-1312.
And they pass. So it is illegal to misgender.
Correct. Or dead name. So to call someone by their biological name, which is dangerous. Like, as I'm out educating parents about predators in our community, if they're trans identified, I can't refer to them as their legal name. And therefore, their criminal history is erased. We also have a bill, get this, they called it Tierra's Law. Tierra is a pimp. He pimps out children to dance sexually, like drag shows with children performers. So they named it Tierra's Law, and it made it so that if you're transgender, you can erase your criminal history. So you can legally change your name, and then all of your felonies they're expunged essentially, because unless you have someone's social security number, you can't look them up.
What is the reasoning behind that?
It's all about dignity of transgenders, respect for their identity. They have so many protections. It's unconstitutional for them to continue to pass these protections for trans identified people that the rest of us don't have.
So transgender is a super identity. You have more rights.
Right.
Like you have extra rights. Extra rights that aren't in the Constitution. You have rights that which I find interesting, because for those that are interested in the Oppression Olympics, more rights than if you're Black, if you're Hispanic, you're transgender, you've got those extra super rights, because I know there's not a law that says if you're Hispanic and you get to erase your criminal history, or if you're Black, you get to erase your criminal history. But if you identify as trans, I mean, that would be, for a bad actor, that might be a good gig to like just identify as trans and get your whole record erased if you just identify. And then, hey, that's kind of that would be something that a criminal mind would easily manipulate.
It's already happening in prisons. When we hear all these stories of women, inmates being raped by trans identified men, of course the men want to get out of the men's prison and go in with the women, and then they're raping and impregnating women. These are criminals who are using the system of trans identification to get into the women's prisons. It's already happening. It's not surprising. This is insane. Get this one. So, like, trans is the sacred cow of Colorado. They passed a law last year. It's 1309, House Bill 25-1309, that forces private insurance companies to pay for any procedure that any one behavioral therapist deems medically necessary for trans identified people. So if you go to one counselor and the counselor says, oh, you're trans, you need, and they explicitly listed these things: breast implants, blepharoplasty, skin tightening, hair implants, full phalloplasties, hormones, wrong sex hormones. So a woman whose hormones are off balance, who needs testosterone to rebalance, has to pay for it out of pocket. But a man who wants estrogen, covered 100%. Or a woman who had breast removal because of breast cancer and needs reconstruction, she's not guaranteed coverage. But a man who wants breast implants, 100% guaranteed coverage. We're paying for it. And our state even put in a slush fund for tax dollars. So in anticipation of Trump saying we're not giving Medicaid funds for these procedures anymore, they created a slush fund to make sure that our state tax dollars are going towards trans procedures. So again, special rights that the rest of us don't have.
So in a reaction to, I think it was late December, HHS, NIH, they had a press conference. You were there, right? Were you at those press conference?
No, I wasn't.
No, you weren't. Okay. Sometimes everyone thinks I was at things too, when because they had a lot of things. But Chloe Cole was there for sure. She spoke, and they discussed that they were that's the end of the Trump administration. If the federal government isn't going to fund these procedures on minors, so they're not going to fund. And I think it was just minors, or is it fund them at all?
It's just minors at this point, but I know there are bills working through Congress that are trying to strip the Medicaid funding.
Okay.
It's the Crenshaw bill.
Okay, the Crenshaw
now sits with the Senate for that reason. All Medicaid funds.
Yeah, no,
and it should be that way. And you know what's crazy about our bill here in Colorado?
I can't get breast implants just because I want them and have it covered by private insurance or government insurance. Like, why should their elective procedures be covered?
Oh, it's insane. Or again, like hormone therapy that women need after pregnancy. You need hormone balance. Well, you pay out of pocket for that. Insurance companies do not cover that for women. Now they have to cover it for men. Wrong sex hormones. And we tried to push an amendment that put
wrong sex hormones.
Wrong sex. Well, sex rejecting. I like that term.
Yeah, too. I like sex rejecting. I'm trying to use that more. But wrong sex hormones. Yeah, I like that. Sex rejecting.
And there's no age limit. So, and there's no requirement for you to be a Colorado citizen. So they're and I call this gender trafficking. It's a term James Lindsay, our friend, came up with recently in response to a meeting you and I were both at, where we talked about this. And it's hard to define, but they're bringing kids over the state line, because if you can get them here, then no other state laws apply. That's another law that they passed. So no custody agreements, no other state laws. If you can get the child to Colorado, you can mutilate them. It's taxpayer funded, and it's done in secret. This bill also took these wrong sex hormones off the drug monitoring program and eliminated all the existing public data. So we don't even know how many kids are being brought here to be chemically castrated, and we're paying for it, and it's done in secret.
How is any of this legal? I just don't even, I'm not usually like, I'm like beyond aghast and angry. I'm like, I don't even know what to say. This is all so bad.
It seems unbelievable. Like when I go talk in other states, I was just in Florida this past week, and people are like, there's no way that's real. And I'm like, here's the numbers of the laws, go look them up. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but like, this is happening. You
need to talk about this in Florida. You need, because they can't get complacent. Iowa, you need to talk, all of the red areas South Carolina, where I see really good people. They're very conservative, and when they don't have Democrats to fight, sometimes they end up unfortunately fighting each other. You need to go talk to them and say, there, but for the grace of God, go you. Don't think this can't happen to you. They're trying to put wedges so that you don't vote, you don't get involved, you start to tune out, and then they'll come right in. You think that the barbarians are at the gates, always, always. And you let your guard down and they're going to climb the walls. It's the orcs of, if you like Lord of the Rings, the orcs are at the walls and they're coming, and you've got to be prepared. But this scares me.
And they're deceptive. I, caution people that a lot of these bills that I'm referring to, it's not obvious. It's not like the trans your kids or we'll take them bill. They deceptively name it. They hide the language deep within, page 7, where they know no one's going to pay attention to it. And oftentimes in the case of gender medicine or wrong sex interventions on kids, they hide it in abortion bills. They call it legally protected health care. And so they get all of the liberal and moderate women to vote yes on these things, not understanding at the ballot and in the legislature that they're deceptively including child mutilation into the legislation. It's really deceptive.
Yes, this is very. I thought Washington was bad when I was talking to Sarah, and she was telling me they were successful in getting their what we call it referendum, but their ballot initiative 2 years ago. And then back then the Washington state legislators, they confirmed it, everything. And then the state superintendent of education basically told all the school districts, you can't implement this, you cannot provide parental rights, you cannot follow this provision that went through all the correct legal processes and was legal. And if you do, I will defund you by 20%, and scared them all. And so they didn't implement it. And then 1 year later, they just gutted that legislation, that initiative. They just had to wait a year. They gutted it. And now they've had to pass it again. They had to get the signatures again. And now it's on the ballot again. And this time they know better. They've got their group, Let's Go with Washington. But she just described, and because I'm not from there, I can't go through. Listen, it's posted. We talked yesterday, and it's on the live streams. But she just went through every time. They just moved the goalposts. They changed the laws. They did things that I'm like, how is this legal? Everything they're doing, it seems just wrong. And I'm not a constitutional law attorney, but this all has to be wrong. And she said, yeah, but to go through the courts, it's years. And so they're just doing illegal things and waiting. They don't care if they're not getting in trouble. There's nothing how can it just be that there's nothing anyone can do?
Well, we are with the ballot measures and with the lawsuits. I've had multiple lawsuits against these laws in Colorado. It just takes 5 to 6 years. They know they can get away with it. And in the meantime, it's costly. You have to find people to plaintiff, which is very hard to find people to put their names. Like, to find a parent to fight back against these egregious laws is harder than fighting them. It's the most difficult element of fighting them, because people are afraid to put their name on it and to put their money where their mouth is.
What do they do to parents and families, like some of what you've gone through? Maybe now here's a good time. Talk about a little bit about what you went through and why it's been challenging. But let's put a positive spin. But look, you're here, you're standing, you're fine. Because I always like to have the encouragement. Yeah, it might be tough, but you kind of paved the way in some ways so that it's you forged a path that you've done something no one had done before, but now that you've done it and a few other, it is easier because there's a support system and there are attorneys, and I think that's your goal, right? You're trying to make it easier so more parents can join and they can feel like, yeah, this is hard, but it's not impossible, and you'll be better for it. But go ahead.
Well, I know you get that because you've done the same thing. where you are, where someone had to step out on a limb and go first. And fear is crippling. I get that, but courage is contagious. And the worst thing that people have done is say bad things about me. I lost my job over it. It was a horrible job. I worked in corporate HR. What a blessing that God closed a door. And it was miserable for me. Like, my career was not enjoyable. So in hindsight, like, yeah, I've lost friends. I've been attacked. We've had home break-ins. I get death threats. People call me horrible names. If you look in the Reddit for my town where I live, Fort Collins, and search me, it's not pretty. People really hate me here. Fine. I don't care what people are saying about me. And if people aren't talking about you, you're not really being effective, are you? Like, we can't be crippled by fear of what people will say about us.
And there's a lot of people that love you, and a lot of people that appreciate you, and a lot of people that write wonderful things about you and respect you, and you speak and you receive awards. So there's a lot of people that have a lot of respect for you too, and acknowledge all that you do. So,
well, for every person that was removed, God gave me 3 more people who were encouraging, who pray for us, who are genuine friends, not surface level friends. Really, our life was kind of revived through this process because we leaned into it and said yes when things were scary and hard. And it started when my 12-year-old daughter was secretly transitioned in her 6th grade classroom by absolute predators, by this organization called Splash or Skittles. She's like 8 different names. Skittles is her group for 2 to 11-year-olds. She works for our county health department. She's a foster parent. She's a caseworker. She's got a physical space. She's got a homeless shelter. She's in the libraries. She's a substitute teacher. She is funded by billionaires. She is well protected by the police. Like, we have actual children who have been missing in our community, which she tried with me. They call CPS. They did that on my family. They try a well child check. If that's not effective, they coach the kids to run away. Again, it's that term gender trafficking that James Lindsay has coined. Like, that's what happened to my family when we were your normal, unassuming, leftist leaning, weak in my faith, just right for this family who would have been very easy to bowl over. And it was really my husband who stepped in and was like, no, our daughter's not a boy. We're not doing that. No, you're not coming back in my home. Child Protective Services. No, she's not going back to that school. And removed every bad influence. And it still took a year to get her out. She almost committed suicide because of bad laws in Colorado. And we were unassuming that forced the therapist to affirm her. That's now been challenged at the Supreme Court 6 years after it was passed in a case called Childs v. Salazar. But we didn't know. We didn't know that law existed. And so therapy made her worse and made her suicidal. And then her pediatrician made us leave the room because 12-year-olds are in charge of their own health care. In Colorado, that's another bill that was passed in 2019. It's 19-1120. 12-year-olds are in charge. And so the pediatrician affirmed her and prescribed her. And we were at threat of risk of losing our child for not going along with it. Thank God we didn't. Like, we evaded that. And that's why I speak up. Long story short, we're one of the lucky families. This happens a lot. Our stories are always the same. Quirky, quiet, artsy, or autistic girls who just don't quite fit in, starting puberty. Puberty sucks. And these predators came in and took advantage of her. She was connected online with them. She was talking on Discord with adults about running away, about how her family was not loving and supportive. Like, how evil is that? I sent her to public school and she came home confused, a boy, hating her parents, not trusting us, connected to predators I didn't even know she had met, that she's now talking to online. Like, how dangerous. And
that's so dangerous.
Fought back.
And so I was going to say, I would take all of the hate and scorn and, Reddit, if that meant saving my kid. So you've got the ultimate victory. You saved your daughter. You saved your daughter. You saved her life, and you rescued her, and you fought hard. And so in that way, like, what you've done is just tremendous. I'm adding right now. I have here Meg. Meg Brock. Hi, Meg. I'm glad you could join us. How's South Carolina?
It's good. It's a little cold. Kids are out of school still, but it's good.
Because there's no plows.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple in the state, but being from Pennsylvania, I'm used to snow plows and salt trucks everywhere, and it's definitely not like that in South Carolina.
No, it's not. But thanks for joining us. I'm just learning a lot about Colorado. That's like extremely shocking. Meg, you're an investigative reporter and FOIA queen, and so I'm interested. I know that you've written a lot about the issue of gender ideology and what's happening in states, what's happening with policy. And so I'm taking notes because Aaron keeps telling me all of these things, and I'm like, I got to talk to, like, how do you, like, I can't believe all of this is happening. And so what is the most recent, what are in Colorado right now? What are you kind of dealing with right now? What is your mission right now?
Yeah, well, and I'm just to shout out Meg. She's written about our story in the CPS element and read some of my FOIAs, so she knows the insanity that's happening in Colorado. So I founded Protect Kids Colorado, and our primary objective right now is running these ballot measures. So same as Let's Go Washington. What's really cool about Colorado, in regards to, in contrast to Washington, is that it doesn't have to go back through the legislature. So if we can get enough signatures to make the ballot, the people vote on it, the legislature cannot touch it. The governor doesn't have to sign it. It does not go back to them for approval or amendment. It becomes law and effective immediately. Now, the legislature can go back and try to chop and screw the will of the people with future legislation. I dare them, and see how we come after them and take their seats if they try to overturn the will of the people. But it's just stricter penalties for child sex trafficking, no boys and girls sports, and then stopping the sex rejecting procedures on minor children. And we're so close. We have 2 weeks left from today until turn in. So we still need about 25,000 more signatures. We're all volunteer. We're like all day, every day. We've got 1,800 people now all over the state carrying petitions. So we're so close. If we can get the signatures, we'll make the ballot, we'll win, and we will watch the dominoes fall in all of these blue states on these issues. So
25,000 more signatures. So you're really close. And then you want to get a little bit over that because of a challenge, right? So how many do you want to get?
Yeah, 165 is our threshold to make sure we win. We think we have about 130 now. So really, I guess that's another 35,000 signatures that we need to get before turn-in day, which is 2 weeks away. But it's doable. It's never been done before. All volunteer. Usually this is a billionaire process. Let's Go Washington have the funding to buy the signatures. We didn't. And so we are all volunteer. We mobilized the church, the Catholic diocese put out a mandate. We just have so many people who have come behind us to make this happen. So it's actually feasible, but we're going to be pushing really hard.
So yeah, I think you can do it. 25,000, and you're doing a lot of social media. You're trying, and then if you get, so what would happen? So you get the signatures, you turn them in, and you have enough. So what would happen next?
Mm-hmm. So it's about a 30-day process for them to discover which one, what percentage they'll invalidate, which is up to 30%. That's why we need to get more than that 125,000 mark. But then it goes on the November ballot for the people to vote as an amendment to statute. It's not a constitutional, it's a statutory amendment. But again, these are like 90-10 issues. So it's just a matter of, if we get the signatures, we make the ballot, it will pass, it will become law, and Colorado will take a huge hit on the chin, because much like Washington, they've been in charge for decades, just passing insane law after insane law. No one's checked them on these issues. And this is the only means by which we have to fight back, is this ballot measure process, which only half of the states even have. So we're lucky to have it in these blue states like Washington and Colorado. But it would become law effective immediately after the November vote. And I don't think they would be able to overturn it through legislation.
So Meg, what have you found in your FOIA research when you've been looking into what's happening with Colorado CPS? What are the things that you've discovered?
I mean, I haven't FOIA'd. I've tried to FOIA Colorado. Their FOIA laws are not very favorable. They're a little tough. But I mean, I did a FOIA a lot on in Ohio. There's a county in Ohio, and in regards to a federal program with a group of federal activists that worked with the Biden administration to really create and solidify a pathway through federal regulation for parents across the country to have their children taken away for simply affirming their sex. And we actually did at the Daily Calling News Foundation, we posted a 4-part series on that in October 2024 that really went into depth of how this group of activists had gained millions of dollars in federal funding to then pilot these programs in 4 different states and then use the results of their research to then influence if you remember, there was a regulation that was introduced in September of 2023 that basically prohibited not, quote unquote, non-affirming families to be foster parents. And built into that was a lot of these other regulations that are ongoing in local CPS agencies that really categorize affirming a child's sex as transphobia, as child abuse. And it's really horrifying when you lift that rock up and see what's underneath.
And, and I'm just pulling up, just looking even at your X account and right at the top, like in October, it took 2 years to obtain almost 2,500 pages of emails from the top gender medicine doctors and revealed that they knew the gender science was shoddy, but pushed these chemical sex changes on kids anyway. I like the term that Erin has used, giving wrong sex hormones and sex rejecting therapy. So even though you can prove, I'm sure, Erin, you've talked about this ad nauseum, even though the science has shown that it's shoddy. We saw in December, we saw Dr. Oz and Dr. Marty, how do you say his last name? I'll say it wrong. McClary. He was one of the doctors that spoke, and then we had Robert Kinney Jr. and there was a couple other doctors, and they said that the science is it's completely inconclusive, and that the studies that were done that they didn't even publish because the findings didn't work in the favor of those that support this transgender medicine, especially for minors. So, but yet they persist.
Yeah. It's circular. The science doesn't exist because it's WPATH pointing back to WPATH, which is a membership organization. And they're using absolutely debunked scientific method and theories. So it's circular science. It really doesn't even exist. Of course, there's not enough research to support these interventions being life-saving. We know they're not. I've personally experienced that it's the opposite, that the impossible pursuit to change your sex causes suicidality, that mutilating your body irreversibly causes suicidality. It's not non-affirmation.
Meg, you're a nurse, you're a registered nurse. Why continue on this path if you're a person, like you're in healthcare, like your job is to help people that are sick and make them better? Why do you think they continue?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is that all of the medical associations, I would say all, but many medical associations are still completely captured and completely moving full steam ahead on this ideology. And so when you have people who speak out, I think of Dr. Heim in Texas, I mean, look what they did to him. They really tried to use him as an example of what the system would do to somebody for daring to speak the truth on this issue. And for those who aren't familiar with his story, I mean, the DOJ came after him. They were threatening to put him in prison, all because he spoke out about transgender sex rejecting medical procedures that were ongoing at a children's hospital he was working on, even though the Texas legislature had already banned them and said they couldn't do them anymore. So, I mean, I think that's a big reason. I think there are probably far more healthcare professionals who understand that this is wrong and this shouldn't be happening. I think a lot of them are scared to speak out. I also think that these organizations tend to be hijacked by a small group of activists. And if particularly in medicine, if a doctor doesn't have expertise on an issue, they're going to typically refer to someone who does. So when you have a group of activists that have positioned themselves as the experts, then I think there is a hesitancy to overstep that so-called expertise, even though to me, I mean, you're cutting off the breast of teen girls. You would hope that would motivate people to say, just a little common sense. But I think we all recognize that common sense is not as common as it used to be.
And so like going through there, the billing codes, that's been something. So what are ways, because I talked to Dr. Heim about this too, and he sent me some files that I just don't have the medical background to decipher. And so I'm getting some help, but ways that these procedures are coded make it difficult for people to know what's happening, even if you're in a state that says, oh, we've, like the Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, we're not going to be providing this care to minors. Well, how do you know if some of the coding can be deceptive?
Yeah, I think people need to understand billing codes. There's two types of medical billing codes. There's ICD codes and there's CPT codes. ICD codes are diagnostic codes that are published by the World Health Organization. CPT codes are procedural codes that are published by the American Medical Association. And so these codes are used not only for insurance billing, but they also create a large data set that is used with research. So a lot of times, if you look at a research study, they'll mention billing codes because that's how they can keep track of things like, for example, precocious puberty. How many examples of precocious puberty or of during COVID cases or whatever, so that's how they're going to track that information. And so what can happen, and the Texas, Ken Paxton down in Texas, the Attorney General down there, has already filed 2 lawsuits against sex rejecting doctors alleging that they were improperly using billing codes. So if there was a child who needed puberty blockers, for example, the only FDA approval for puberty blockers is precocious puberty, which is having an early puberty. Outside of that, it's not FDA approved for use in children. However, it's possible that if a gender doctor, for example, wants to give a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, a 12-year-old puberty blockers, these medications can cost tens of thousands of dollars. So it's unlikely the child's going to be able to afford them without insurance coverage. So the DOJ is investing gender medicine doctors and hospitals throughout the country and has filed more than 20 subpoenas. Now, most of these subpoenas, many of them are being challenged in court. In some of those court documents, the DOJ has pointed out that they've seen a spike of precocious puberty diagnoses happening at ages 10, 11, 12, 13, and beyond. And why that would raise a red flag is that you're typically not going to see children diagnosed with early puberty at an age when puberty is normally occurring. So for a piece I recently wrote, I spoke to several endocrinologists, and they all seem to agree that, yeah, you're going to probably put a child on precocious puberty blockers for true precocious puberty before ages 8. Yes. So you wouldn't expect a child who is 10 or 11 or 12 going to normal puberty. You're not going to pause that because there's nothing precocious about it.
Yeah, 12-year-old is I like 11, 12. That is I menstruated at, I believe, like late 11. So did my mom. That's not considered precocious puberty. That might be a little earlier than some, but precocious is like 8.
Yeah, so I think that's a big question mark, and why the DOJ subpoenas are so important, because if the DOJ was to say, for example, these diagnoses that they flagged go into those patients' charts, well, if it was precocious puberty, there's lab work, there's medical diagnostic assessments that you would expect to see indicating that that child had that diagnosis. If those things aren't there, then you can make the case that this is probably fraudulent. But these subpoenas are being blocked in court, and I think that we really do need transparency and clarity to see what's going on.
Well, Erin was just telling me, and she could go about House Bill, I wrote down 1309, forcing private insurance companies to pay for any procedure. Can you explain, tell me, if you haven't heard this, how can they do that when they're considering executive orders? And I don't know, can they do that? Can the state force private insurance companies to pay for elective procedures?
The state can do whatever they want for as long as they can get away with it, which is the pattern here in a state like Colorado, where yes, we'll challenge it in court. It's long, it's lengthy, it's costly, may have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, which takes 5 to 6 years. So they just kind of do what they want. That's indicative of like the marijuana law that was passed here first, where it was federally illegal, but they thumbed their nose at federal law and said, we're going to do it anyway. Come and get us. They get away with it. And we, the taxpayers, we, the people who pay into the private insurance companies in Colorado that are now fleeing and raising our premiums to astronomical rates, we pay the price for that. They get away with
All
it.
in America. If I have United Health Insurance. If the United Health is now paying for these procedures, forced to pay for them, they're going to raise the premiums on all the people that use their insurance, the companies, because they have to make up for the fact that they now have to pay for this in Colorado. So everyone will pay more for health insurance. And that's an outrage to me that we pay pretty high premiums for insurance. We have a large family, and it gets higher every year. But that now I am funding something that I shouldn't, because it's elective, and I find morally, ethically, religiously repugnant to me. That's shocking.
And for children, and because there's no limit.
Yes, for children.
Yeah, and for children who don't even live in the state of Colorado, as they covered. You can get them here. We cover it.
You just have to go to Colorado. You could, a kid from South Carolina, Wisconsin, Iowa can just, a minor.
Correct.
Without parents.
Correct. Because again, 12-year-olds steward their own healthcare in Colorado.
I just don't. I'm blown
insane.
away.
And there are some other really scary elements.
On so many levels. I'm just blown away. How can this happen? How can nurses, doctors go along with this? How can politicians? How can adults? I just don't understand. I mean, where do they recover from these procedures? Who takes care of them?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are no codes for detransition care or for care after you've been mutilated. But to Meg's point about the medical industry, what I've learned in talking to a lot of doctor friends is that most doctors are removed from this. Like, gender medicine is such a specific niche part of medicine that it's really easy to be willfully ignorant and apathetic and just turn a blind eye as a medical provider when it's just not something that they're exposed to on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, my son's he's in medical, so he's starting his residency soon. And when I talked to him, he's like, I really don't, like, this is not an area of medicine I ever want to be involved in and disagree with. And they kind of thinks, I'm like, and I say, you think you can shield yourself from this, but if this goes the wrong way, 3 years from now, if we have someone different in office, I'm not sure there'll be a lot of places you can go where this won't impact you in some way.
Yeah.
But even with the medical records, or even if I know when we were in Pennsylvania, a lot of offices, you walk into the office and if your child is maybe 12 or 13, they might hand them an iPad and have a questionnaire, and that questionnaire might ask about their gender identity, might ask if they are confused. So it's even, even people who are in the delivery care system who might not have anything to do with gender medicine are being made active participants in having to ask patients for this information. And I think what's so problematic is that we know that kids are very impressionable. Adolescents are very impressionable. So you could have a child who gets this seed in their head, and maybe it's something they never really thought about, and then they go on their phone and all of a sudden their TikTok or Instagram algorithm is like, yeah, you know what? Like 12-year-old girl who just got asked this question at the doctor's office and now is thinking about it. Maybe you are a boy. Maybe you need to reach out to your school's local, GSA club and find a trusted adult who you can talk to this about, and the trusted adult's not mom and dad. So I think that all of these things, when we think about the gender pipeline, a lot of it really is happening. The initial questioning, the initial seeds are happening at schools. They could be happening at a medical appointment. And that kind of then gets fire or grows through the warm soil of the internet. And then the next thing you know, you have a child who is maybe a 14-year-old girl and she wants to cut her breasts off and make this decision that has no capabilities of making, and is asking for something that's deeply unethical.
I think like a lot of people will move. I know you relocated from Pennsylvania to South Carolina. There are many that have said, like, I've got young kids. I need them to be in a different school system or job, like whatever. But if they have to relocate, they move to Florida, they move to a red state. Erin, do you think that the same is true for those who are very progressive, very woke, that they've decided, I have to leave Florida to red here, and they moved to Colorado? And so there's these entrenched states that are just wildly progressive. Like it's starting to look like insanity.
1,000,000%. I did the opposite. I moved from Florida to Colorado when I was a lefty for that reason. And now like I have to stay here and fight it because someone has to. Again, we're a litmus test. So goes Colorado, so goes the nation, or as goes Colorado. Someone has to stay here and fight. But yes, like I see Texas license plates all the time. The progressive people from the red states flee to states like Colorado, and we're the only blue state around in this Western region. They do come here. Like Jamie Reed has said that when she got her clinic shut down in Missouri, all the doctors moved to Colorado because of the legal protections that fortify their ability to do whatever they want with children with no consequence. They've even eliminated a civil course of action for detransitioners outside of Colorado. So they're just, protected here, and they are fleeing here for that reason, but it's still happening in the red state. And I can't caution people enough that, especially on what we're talking about, that gender trafficking side, even if it's not in law, Child Protective Services, family court, the legal system, they've all been hijacked. These NGOs, the medical organizations. And so whether or not it's explicitly in law, it's still happening to families who won't affirm their kids because it's policy, it's practice, it's regulation. And that's what's happening in all 50 states. If you won't trans your kids, you'll lose them. I just talked to a family in Florida last week that this was happening too. So you're not immune in Florida.
So Meg, I know that the CPS issue, you wrote about foster care. We talked about that. You did the deep dive. Is this something that you've done research on? Is this on your radar? CPS, Child Protective Services, and trafficking kids, basically, even out of red states?
I mean, one of the stories I did was an in-depth story with a family from Maryland whose son was taken from them, and they never end up getting him back. So, I mean, I think that, to Erin's point, that and that was with the focus of our research, or was really on the kind of tastemakers, for lack of a better term, if you will, who are then creating these social services intervention. I'll call them tools. That's what I say they're tool. It is ultimately a tool. And trainings, and these are the things that then get passed down to your county CPS. So part of our investigation, there were these implementation sites of this radical research, and one of them was in Ohio. So you think Ohio is a red state. Ohio is a state that passed a bill to stop sex rejecting interventions. You wouldn't expect to see this total hotbed of affirming CPS services happening in the red state of Ohio. But I actually found that the local CPS, through FOIA, I got a database, a spreadsheet, where they were tracking families who they had a program called Safe Identification. And so if I haven't accessed this part of my brain for a while, so to think about this here. But basically, they had the whole thing online. They took it down now. But the social worker, if they were called out to a family, let's say the child confides to the social worker, hey, I think I'm a different sex and my parents aren't affirming me. Well, then the social worker could make a mark and have this safe identification worksheet where then they would track that in a database. So it's on their radar of like, okay, this family, even though they could not be called out for anything related to that. I mean, who knows why they were called out, but they could then track on this database, this family has a child who might need, or hey, these parents aren't on board. They might need this special training to help them become affirming. And you think about how crazy that is, that the government could tell families, particularly families, a lot of times in what I've researched is there's a particular focus on religious families. So really targeting families who they know have a religious conviction amongst just a biological conviction that men are men and women are women, and specifically targeting those families. So this issue is a cross section of so many violation of rights, of religious freedom, of medical freedom, of parental rights, of freedom of speech. Like, that's why I really think it is, in the midst of so many important issues going on in society, perhaps the most important issue, because if we can't define what's blatant in front of us, then how can we define anything else in society and have any clear rights? Like, you can't really have freedom without truth. So if we disattach truth from society, then how are we going to have the freedom to raise our kids according to reality?
Erin, I know you have to go. Closing, first of all, please send me. I have notes, but could you send me today, like the bills and the legislation that you were talking about? Like, just because when I do some posting and talk about this, I want to have all of that correct. Thank you for coming on. Closing, how can we be of help? You have 2 weeks left, and final words.
Thank you. Yes, all hands on deck for the ballot measures. Anyone who has a pulse and knows 10 people can be part of helping us make the ballot. So they just go to protectkidscolorado.org, and sign up to carry a petition, or find where to sign one, or donate. Every $5 gets us one signature. Again, we are so close, and what happens in Colorado will have a ripple effect all over the country. It's really important that we get these on the ballot. So protectkidscolorado.org.
protectkidscolorado.org. Donate. You don't have to live in Colorado to donate. I'll donate today. Give something to help, because that'll help their efforts. Let's get them 25,000 plus, so that they have more signatures than they need, so that, because they, unlike Washington, this is a surefire path that this becomes, they don't have to put it on the ballot. It becomes law. So that's really important. Thank you, Erin, for coming on and for blowing my mind. And wow. Keep fighting.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
All right. Bye, ladies.
So Meg, so I got you can't have freedom without truth. That's so true. But in Ohio, and it's you would not think Ohio, but that they're identified. Of course, it makes sense that they're looking. They're trying to find these kids and target them. And like you said, then they can get caught up in kind of an ecosphere.
I think one of the biggest things for people to kind of wrap their heads around, and it can kind of be difficult because it seems so removed from what's real, but there are activists out there who truly believe what they would call transphobia. So really, if you're saying a child I just use the example of, like, let's say a 13-year-old girl who thinks she's a boy. Let's say if you won't affirm that she's a boy, there are activists out there who would say, well, that's transphobic. You're being transphobic, and believe that any form of quote unquote transphobia is actual child abuse. They see it as child abuse. They see it as an adverse, an adverse event that a child faces. So when you label that as abuse, then it carries all the ramifications of actual child abuse. Like, obviously, if there are children being abused, we want to protect them.
Yeah.
We don't want them abused. We want them, there are situations where children really do need to be removed from their homes because they're not safe. You know, the situation of a child, of parents affirming biology is not one of those situations. Now, to be fair, I mean, if there was actual child abuse, like let's say a parent is not giving a child a place to sleep or not giving them food, but I would say that that's already covered in child abuse law, right? So those are all things that you're not, as a parent, allowed to do to a child because it's abusive and neglect. So to be clear, any of those things, whatever the reason, should be handled as abusive because it is. But we're talking specifically about the only quote unquote crime a parent has committed is refusing to adopt this radical ideology and affirm it in their child. They are loving parents. They are wanting to work with their child. They're wanting to help their child. They see their child is deeply confused and they're trying to help them. They're trying to bring them to a therapist who will help them reclaim their identity. So it is a very, very dangerous and precarious thing where we have a situation that could very easily swing into some really dangerous territory for parents across the country.
And so, your most recent piece with Daily Caller that we wanted to talk about. So the unearthed data makes Pennsylvania's puberty blocker payouts look sketchier. So you said 220 claims for puberty blocking drugs were reimbursed for minors 10 to 13 with this classification of precocious puberty. And that's a big increase from, it says here 2012. Then I'm looking, you probably not looking, and I'm looking at the graph, and you can see just by the graph some of those increases. And that is something that the DOJ has. They have sent out subpoenas. They want to know more.
Yeah, so the DOJ has sent subpoenas to specific providers, and in two of the legal documents, like I said, a lot of these subpoenas are being challenged in court. And in some of the legal documents, they brought up that they said that the DOJ alleged through an analysis of insurance claims, they found a spike in precocious puberty diagnoses happening for children ages 10 and up. So they outlined these in some of their documents. And so what I did is I asked Pennsylvania to provide me how many children, I asked for, they wouldn't provide the specific age, but they were able to provide an age range of how many reimbursement claims they've had for puberty blockers using this one specific code that was brought up in some of the DOJ subpoenas. And so what the data that they gave me, and this was statewide, this wasn't for any specific institution, but what's interesting is they found that like there weren't any reimbursements from 2010 to 2012, and then you saw between 2013 and 2017 a spike in the use of this code attached to puberty blockers. And I spoke to several doctors behind the scenes, and I was told that this is something that you would expect to see the spike in the use of a code in something like an infectious disease, right? So you think like when COVID happened, obviously before 2020, we weren't seeing any diagnoses of COVID in the insurance database, but when COVID happened, you saw a spike, and that probably went down as time progressed. And that's typical in an infectious disease. And something like precocious puberty, which is an endocrine disorder, it's stable in overall it's stable in the population, unless there's some big environmental event, which I don't think there's any indication that has happened. So you wouldn't then expect to see the specific code go up in use because this is for a diagnosis that's stable in the pediatric population.
Wow. And so then what do you so the DOJ is investigating billing fraud involving Pennsylvania. So this is just one.
This was in Pennsylvania. Yes, correct.
So you could say that if there's something a little, your spidey sense is going off, something off going on in Pennsylvania, you could imagine that that's something that's happening in other states.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just really have no idea, right? I mean, there have been attempts, do no harm. They created a Stop the Harm database where they went through insurance claims, but they were using the diagnoses specific to gender dysphoria. There's about 5 diagnostic codes that are typically used to code for that. And what's interesting is that a lot of clinics, if you've read their documents, will have talked about the numbers of their growth, of how their patient populations have significantly grown from the 2010s to now. And if you go through the Do No Harm database, I think that from talking to people, that some of the numbers they found were not as high as they might have expected, and specifically maybe not as high as what some of the gender clinics themselves have talked about with their growth. So I think there's just a lot of questions, and this is really why the DOJ investigation is so important, because there's a lot of things that we don't know, and we really do want to know about the billing practices going on, about the codes being used, about any potential fraud. I mean, the one chart in one of the DOJ subpoenas was saying like kids as old as like 14. I think there was one who was in a Boston Children's subpoena, a child that was diagnosed with precocious puberty at age 22, if I'm remembering correctly, but over age 20. And you think like that just doesn't really make sense. So that's why there really needs to be some clarity and transparency.
Especially now that the Trump administration is coming down hard, saying that we're not going to provide federal funding, federal dollars for sex rejecting care for minors. That would mean that there might be some ways that some people that they think they're doing the right thing, like you said, they would not call it unethical. They think it's purely ethical. I'm saving children. I'm saving their lives. What wouldn't you do to save a children's life? So I have to fudge or figure out a coding system so that these kids can get the care that they need. I can totally see it, that this is something that it's good to keep an eye on, because I think there'll be more of it. I mean, some of the stuff, and I wasn't aware, because like talking with Aaron, can't be aware of anything. There's just always so much going on. But that there last year was passed HB 251109, 4-month jail sentence if the wrong sex is put on a death certificate. So or dead named, that gender identity, according to a state representative, that by the second trimester, a baby knows their gender identity. Same representative was a leader and instrumental in passing a bill that provides abortion after birth in Colorado. So, which is,
that's confusing.
That's very confusing. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
They know in the womb, but you can abort them. They apparently have such self-awareness that they know their gender identity, but you can abort them even after they're born. That's not abortion, by the way, that's murder. That it's illegal to misgender or use a dead name. It's illegal, fined, and civil prosecution. I mean, this is.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the, particularly on documents, and we had talked about this a little bit more in healthcare, is that it's actually really important when you're providing care to someone to know what their sex is, because there are differences in how men's bodies and women's bodies work and how they react to certain treatments, to medication. I mean, that's even a big thing in clinical trials. You know, there's like a push to get more women involved because how a woman's body reacts to a medication might be different than how a man's body reacts to a medication. And then you think about just different diagnoses of something that could be wrong that's specific to your sex organ. So I mean, the whole thing is just very problematic. And I don't really think anyone should be forced to pretend that someone can change their sex. To reaffirm gender identity too. I mean, whenever people hear that word, just know that it's talking about feelings. All gender identity is how someone feels about their sex. It's just a feeling. So you think about what is more real, what carries more weight, something that's real, something you can see, touch, evaluate, or your feelings. And I think we all have feelings. We all know that our feelings can be deceptive. That's why we live in community. That's why we have friends. That's why we have family to help us process our feelings. Feelings aren't a bad thing, but we all know we can be deceived by our own feelings. So it's so insane that we're building all of these laws or these ideas and these policies really just based on someone's feelings.
And like, so if you're a nurse doing an intake, patient comes in, you're in Colorado. What if you're afraid to ask? Looks like a dude, but dressed, maybe has nail polish and using a female name. What if you're afraid to ask, like, well, what's your, or to say you're a man, so we should run tests like that. I mean, what if you can't say those things because then you could lose your job? It's criminal. And you just have to go on and treat this dude who could be so mentally ill that, yeah, they want to be treated the exact same way that a female should. And then you're not providing the care because you're too afraid to even ask the right questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said before, it's why this is such an important issue. If we can't define reality, it's going to make it really difficult for us to define anything else. So, to your point,
it is. It's hard. It's hard to even understand what's going on. And before you go, like, I know we're looking a lot. I think with the reality, then we see what's happening. I don't know I know you still keep an eye on in Pennsylvania, but right now with teachers unions, and I posted a lot this last night. I actually made an account on Blue Sky and did some searching, like my own investigative as much as I could. And their teachers unions post that from not all teachers. I don't even think a majority, but some of these radicalized teachers saying everything that I've learned from NEA, I've learned from ACLU, and encouraging these walkouts this week, encouraging talking politics and talking about these issues to your students, encouraging for them to resist. I have videos, even in my home state, of elected state members of our assembly that they are leading kids out and kind of chants telling them to call representatives to go protest at houses, basically to dox, to do all these things. And if they see an ICE agent, an armed federal agent, what do you do when you see them? Fight back. And they cheer, fight back against the Nazis. These are teenage kids, and you are telling them to fight back and resist armed federal officers. I feel like that should be criminal. It's incitement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a reason why our test scores are so abysmal. Our children are not learning to read. I think I think teachers unions should probably focus on the grades of students and helping equip teachers to teach kids about math and reading. I mean, I know, queer theory, that's like kind of the point is to turn children into activists. And I think it's really sad. I think children should be able to go to school and love learning and not be encouraged to participate in activism or be guilted into participating in activism. They should be hanging out with their friends and playing sports and joining the drama club,
And you're
and
from
making
Bucks County.
cool. Yeah. Sorry.
You're from Bucks County, Pennsylvania. What are some of the things that you saw as far as teachers unions and sort of activist educators? I know that the brief period we were in Philadelphia, how do they react to parents that, like you, that kind of fight back, that call out what's happening and say, like, this is wrong, get back to educating?
Yeah, I mean, I know how I got involved in public records was during COVID, and I found a lot of, there was an op-ed, for example, in our local paper of one of the leaders of the local teachers union really calling for people to disregard the advice of our health director who is trying to get children back to school. And I think about that time, and I think I learned a lot from it. I think we all did. How there were so many of us who were saying, "Hey, we shouldn't be closing schools. We shouldn't be forcing children to have these prolonged quarantines who are healthy. This is really going to have a negative impact on their mental health, on their how they're learning." And now here we are a few years later, it feels like a few days. And there's all of
As you're watching like Minnesota, it's like, am I
it feels like a few days. Yeah.
2020 all over again?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, those of us who were saying, hey, this is going to end poorly for kids, have been completely vindicated. The things that we were saying, there's all this data now to show it. And during it actually wasn't difficult to figure it out. I mean, I remember in 2020 thinking back to, well, what examples do we have in recent time of prolonged school closures, and thinking about what happened in Hurricane Katrina. And there was evidence that a lot of the kids who were missed school because their schools were physically destroyed for months, that had really bad repercussions for them into their adult years. So I think what we're seeing through now, it's not like we haven't seen the same emotionalism, the same tactics, the same calls for destabilization.
Yes.
I think everyone has the right to peacefully protest. I would fully support anyone's constitutional right to do that. I think what we're seeing is when you see what appears to be people trying to obstruct federal agents from doing their job, that's really alarming and really concerning. So
kids getting involved in, even if they're with their parents, first of all, getting involved with their parents about an issue they care about. Now, if their parent decides, I want to pull you out of school and I want to take you to a Trump event, or I want to pull you out of school and I want to take you to a protest against ICE because it's important to me. The parent makes that decision. That's a parent's call. They are making that decision. For schools to talk to students, to lead students out of a classroom, and then to call on them to engage in political acts, and then to tell them to resist, that's a whole nother issue. That's different. Students can, I think, of course, attend events, have all that, but to be truant, because kids can't just leave the school. And my daughters are right now in school. They can't just walk out. The schools would call me and say, hey, your kid just walked out without permission. And if I say, well, they're not allowed, it's truancy. That you should be concerned. But here, I think that it's like, go ahead and do it. It's for a good cause. So that's great. They don't have to have parent permission. There's no permission slips. Can your kid leave school? Nope. Kids can just leave. They can just leave. And that's
well, I think I know that I think it was Philadelphia announced that they're going to be closing like 20 schools. I didn't read it, but I read something about how homeschooling surging, how people are taking their children out of the public school systems across the country. And I think this is really points to why, because aside from the ideological concerns parents might have, kids aren't learning if they're out protesting. Like they're not learning and they're not being equipped to be adults. And that really is the core of why we have schools, why we have education, is that we want to equip students to be successful adults. So anything that's going to take away from that, those things should not be, in my opinion, shouldn't be happening in schools. That kids have the right to express their point of view, absolutely. But in terms of schools and teachers encouraging activism during school hours, I would say maybe even after school hours, that's probably a different issue, but kids need to learn. And so I think we shouldn't be surprised when we're seeing such abysmal reading rates and test scores.
Yes, that's not that they should not be engaged. If juniors and seniors but if you are you're teaching government, something like that, and say like, kid, this is an issue. It's real. I think a good teacher would say, divide it in half. Let's kind of have this debate and then switch.
Mhm.
Now you have to defend the other side. And whatever your beliefs are, I want you to dive into the belief of someone who thinks differently than you and try and understand it. That's what a good teacher does. And then doesn't tell them what to think, but kind of teaches them how to engage in critical thinking. And that sometimes we have to imagine, like, and of course there are extreme scenarios where I'm not going to say imagine that you're a serial murderer or something, but so it's different if to say imagine this scenario where you're just on different sides and you feel passionately. That to me is okay. That is civics. Juniors, seniors are old enough to handle that. I'm not saying that I want to have all these litmus tests in schools. I'm actually like kind of libertarian on a lot of these issues. I'm very pro free speech and don't want to limit what even 16 and 17-year-olds see. But I do think parents have the right to have an input, a say, and they are the ultimate deciders until a minor comes of age.
Absolutely. Yeah. I probably got to get going here. Probably like the next couple minutes.
I have to interview Ryan Walters next.
So. Oh, wow. Well, I've always loved speaking with you, Scarlett. And
yes. I know your kids are home. Stay warm.
Yes, you too. Thank you. We're still probably warmer than you are in Wisconsin. So.
Yes, you are.
You need to say, all right, talk to you later. Okay.
Thanks for coming on. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.